What was your first reaction when you heard Trump was shot?
Oh, man. So, I mean, my first reaction is it was actually on a Shabbat, right? It was on a Saturday for me, so I couldn't actually check the news. So my security came to me, and they said the president's been shot. And I said, well, is he alive, right? I mean, you got to lead with the news, right? Lead with, he's alive, but he's been shot. My first reaction was that God clearly wanted Donald Trump to be president. I'm dead serious. Because there is no way to watch that tape. There's just no way. And see what happened, and see how close we came to the president's brains being splattered on a stage on national television. And not think that God physically reached his hand down into the world and took President Trump's head and went. That was legitimately my first thought. I was actually, it scared the hell out of me, but in a certain way, it was sort of comforting, because when you see an open miracle, which is what I actually think that was, there's no way that shot should have missed. When I see it, and that's, you know, obviously, it's a tragedy. There are people who are killed, and our condolences go to the families, and we've given money to the families. Okay, but when you see something like that, an open miracle like that, the first thing that you have to think is God's hand is present in the world, and for whatever reason, God's hand is on Donald Trump.
And the other thing that is so vitally important for us to understand is that we are a nation whose foundation is God. That is the reason that we went from a ragtag bunch of militiamen to the pinnacle of the world in record time. It was because of a relationship with God. You know, I think of the story of the bulletproof Washington. Many of you know that story. George Washington was a courier during the French and Indian War for General Braddock. All the couriers were killed. They were shot to death. George Washington had 2 horses shot from beneath him. He had 4 bullet holes in his coat, bullet fragments in his hair, but no wounds. And years later, after the war, Washington was back in the area. He wasn't president yet, but one of the Indian chiefs who had been involved in the war, who was elderly and near death, heard that Washington was going to be there. He asked his braves to bring him to where Washington was. He wanted to see him. And they brought him into Washington's presence. And he said to Washington, "Sir, I am an expert marksman, and I shot you 17 times. And my men shot you, and pretty soon I told them to stop wasting their bullets, and I just wanted to be in the presence of the man who is protected by the Great Spirit above." And that story used to be in all of our history books until it became politically incorrect. And then there's the story of the Battle of Long Island when Washington was down to his last platoon. The American Revolutionary War was about to end. General Howe had them surrounded by land and by sea. They were going to wipe out the last of the resistance. Meteorologic records indicate that on that same night, a mysterious heavy fog fell over the area, remained there throughout the night and into the next day, providing cover for Washington and his men to be able to escape. Some people say it was a coincidence. I say it was God. And we must remember what it means when we say that we are one nation under God. We must never forget that relationship. And it's time to come back to it. We've had a chance to see what happens when we put God in the background. We spiral downward. We become enemies. We confuse our children about their gender. We have drag trains in elementary schools. We have men in women's locker rooms and playing women's sports. We lose all of our common sense. All of it is there for us to remember. Don't let anybody tell you that you can't talk about God in public.